Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. We are about to kick off day number 4 of Dare to Be Great 2024, and I am super excited for our keynote speaker this morning. Good friend Michelle Lilly, PhD, is going to be doing a keynote called "What is Greatness?" Take it away, my friend.
All right. Thank you, Ricardo, for having me. It's always a pleasure to come speak with you guys. I'm super excited this morning. And I really appreciate you, Ricardo, because just so you guys all know, he said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, how about what is greatness? And I gave him very little direction as to what I might talk about today. And then just when we were in the green room, I was like, hey, this is what I'm going to talk about. And he's like, all right. So Ricardo, your faith and trust in me to not, screw up your whole conference is, it's felt right here. Okay. So just as a quick introduction, I'm Michelle Lilly. I'm a professor of clinical psychology at NIU. I've been there since 2009, which is crazy. And in that role, I do lots of different things. So train the next generation of trauma-focused clinicians, teach undergrad classes, grad classes. And one of the things that I do there as well, and one of my primary roles is to do research. And so I've been doing research on mental and physical health in first responders for, now it's been about 14, 15 years. And it's been, and kind of where, this is where it brought me to. Ricardo and I met a long time ago, right after the first study on PTSD was published in 2012. I think I was one of the early guests on his podcast. And we've been buddies ever since. So that's my big girl job. But I also own and operate a company called Lilly Counseling and Consultation. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Illinois. So I have a part-time clinical practice focusing on evidence-based treatment for first responders and their families, training. So I'll go across the country doing some trainings, kind of like today. Also do some consulting. If you want to know anything else about some of the things that I offer and the things that I'm up to, if you want a list of publications, I think it's a tab on that. I haven't looked at my webpage in a while, but I need some help with that. But it's www.lilly-consulting.com. So go check it out if you have any questions. All right. So today I'm going to kind of try to tackle the idea of what is greatness. So when Ricardo asked me to do this, I kind of stepped back and I thought, I talk about lots of the same crap over and over again. And, quite honestly, I kind of get bored presenting some of the same stuff over and over. And some of you might feel kind of bored from time to time listening to me talk about the same stuff. And so as I reflected on Dare to Be Great, I really started to think about what does greatness mean? What is greatness, right? So I agreed to do this back in, I don't know, July or August. Ever since then, it's been a kind of season of reflection for me, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So there are lots of reasons why I kind of landed on this topic today, but I'm really going to be kind of digging into the idea of what is greatness and how and can we dare to be great. So what is greatness? If you just look it up on the old Googler, it's the quality of being great, distinguished, or imminent. Dictionary.com, the quality of being important, notable, and again, distinguished, that word distinguished. And if you kind of get on the Google and you really start to deep dive into the concept of greatness, a lot of stuff comes up from the Bible. And I'm going to kind of put this out there, but I just want to be very clear. I am not a particularly religious person. I'm just kind of putting this up there because this is really where a lot of the concept of greatness came from. Greatness is reserved for those who serve, placing other needs above their own. And the Bible also says it's about having sanctified character, beauty of soul, or having the likeness of Jesus upon your lives and hearts. So these are some of those kind of popular ideas about greatness. This is kind of biblical references towards greatness. And you can see that there's it's a little bit all over the place, right? So we see distinguished and imminent, but we also see the concept of serving others and having just simply beauty of soul. So it's not super clarifying, right? I also found some things about like how does one achieve greatness, and I found this to be really compelling in a number of different ways. So, if you get on the Googlers, you can find your steps to achieving greatness. So I'll present these, and then I'm done today, right? Because I will have given you all the steps that you need. You create a vision, right? You have some vision of where you want to go. You're able to turn adversity into advantage, which I think is certainly a sign of adaptability and resilience. You cultivate a champion's mindset. You develop hustle, right? So you work hard, you go after things, you become a master of your body. I think that's fascinating. You practice positive habits. I talk about positive habits all the time, such as being gratitude, such as using gratitude or having a gratitude practice. Also talk about the importance of exercise and sleep. So certainly I believe that having positive habits is important, though whether or not that makes you great, I don't know. You build a winning team. And for those of you who are coming to think about how to help your particular agency, that is a step to greatness. But of course, a winning team could be just the team that you have around you, your family, your friends, the people who are pro you, and be of service to others. So kind of hearkening back to some of that, those more biblical references towards greatness. So this is a great set of steps. I don't know that I would disagree with any of them in terms of living a better life, doing things the right way, building a life that might be meaningful to you. Some of them I'm maybe a little bit less sold on, but these are your steps to achieving greatness. It sounds like a lofty order. And it kind of begs the question, at least for me, to what end? Build a champion's mindset. To what end? Does there need to be an end? We are kind of constantly chasing things, values, people, products, materials that we think other people kind of tell us we ought to value. And we kind of get stuck a little bit. So as I was kind of preparing this, and I was kind of really digging into the idea of, what is greatness and what does it mean? And I went on to that Googler and found some of these steps and these ideas and these quotes. It left me thinking that this concept is kind of sticky and kind of vague. And when we kind of get stuck in these concepts that are sticky and vague, it's oftentimes kind of unattainable, right? If we don't even know what we're kind of reaching for, then it's really hard to know when we get there. Also, one person's vision of greatness may be entirely different than another's. So this is a picture of Julian Assange from WikiLeaks, kind of a polarizing figure. I think that there are some individuals who would argue that there's some greatness associated with WikiLeaks and sharing information globally that other people might want. Working with myself, having worked with people who are in law enforcement and CIA, FBI, they're not a fan, right? And they see somebody like Julian Assange as being a real threat. So, the idea that one person can be great is very within the eye of the beholder, right? And oftentimes the markers are very externally oriented. Right? We are very focused on what one does externally. What are their behaviors? What do they accomplish? What do they produce? What do they invent? And even some of that service to others is in there too, right? And I'm not trying to, poo-poo service to others. It's incredibly important. And I'm going to tell a story about service to others in just a second. But oftentimes, even in service to others, what we're seeing is some sort of external behavior as opposed to, what is inside the individual. So this concept of greatness, the more that I dug into it, the more I was confused as to what it might actually mean. And how do we achieve greatness? And as this conference is named, how do we dare to be great, right? If we're not quite sure what greatness is. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, it's a season of reflection for me. So I started to think about the great people that I know and in my life. And the people that I know, either out in the world or in my family or among people, that other people have used the word great or greatness to describe. So I'm going to tell a little bit of a story. I'm going to look down for a minute because I know that if I go purely into storytelling mode without some notes, we will be here literally all day because, Ricardo, I'm a sucker for a good story. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story for a moment. So this is a person, a woman, who was the third child, who's definitely a surprise, who had two much older sisters. At the age of 3, her mom says that she has a headache while ironing, and they go to sit on the porch for fresh air. At that moment, her mom suffers from a brain aneurysm and collapses and dies. So this little girl was 3 when this happened. While her father tried to care for her, she didn't know how. He didn't know how, and she was shifted around to her sisters' and aunts' homes for much of her childhood. And unfortunately, as a result of that, there was a high level of neglect and maltreatment across her childhood and into her teenage years, and actually even into her adult years. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there was quite a difficult history, right? Lots of neglect, lots of maltreatment in lots of different ways. She worked as an administrative assistant in her early 20s before marrying at 23 and having her first child at 25, after which she had 2 more in the matter of years. I don't know about you. Some of you may have had kiddos younger. I had my kids in my early 30s, and I'm like, whew, I can't imagine having done that in my early 20s. Money was very tight. Her husband worked a lot of overtime and a blue collar job to support the family. Without money or resources, she spent a lot of time at home raising kids and tending to the home. They spent a lot of time at the public library and finding free things to do in town because, again, they didn't have much money. So she returned to work as an admin assistant when the youngest went to kindergarten. So she went back into the workforce. She worked at that same place for 30 years in a tucked away office that was rarely customer facing. So oftentimes, and not because, she had poor social skills, it was just the job. So it's kind of tucked in a corner. She was naturally shy, didn't socialize much outside of work colleagues and long-term friends, though she did pretty much every day have lunch with the other women with whom she worked. She was very insecure about her looks and absolutely hated being in pictures or being the center of attention. She sometimes struggled to stand up for herself, and by that, she rarely, if ever, stood up for herself. She actually never left the United States and only flew on a plane a handful of times. She was medicated for anxiety in her 40s and had some OCD-like things that drove her family crazy, but was entirely hidden from everyone else. So she lived a pretty narrow life, right? That's a kind of, we're kind of thinking somebody kind of tucked away, shy, pretty anxious. She didn't know a lot of people. She didn't know many, if any, people with influence. She never aimed to influence others. She held a job with limited opportunity for advancement. And by that, I mean no opportunity. And I wouldn't say that she really kind of created anything. She didn't invent anything. I don't know that people would call her distinguished, but she did create change around her. She was a devoted mother, friend, wife, caretaker of plants and dogs. And dogs, right? And she never wanted those dogs in the first place. I'm sure many of you are stuck with pets that you tend to, that you're like, I don't know that I signed on for this. Despite being a relatively meek presentation, she had one of the darkest and most biting senses of humor imaginable. She was hilarious. She did not suffer fools, and she could sniff out inauthenticity like a bloodhound. She was fiercely loyal, particularly when it came to her family, and she had 6 grandchildren who she absolutely adored. She actually raised her oldest grandchild because one of her daughters struggled with addictions. She had lunch daily with her work buddies, as I mentioned, and after retirement, met them each week for dinner. She had several elderly friends who she met for coffee, brought grocery shopping, and took to medical appointments. By her late 60s and early 70s, she began showing signs of forgetfulness and confusion, and by the last 6 months of her life, dementia had fully taken hold of her mind, and she died of pancreatic cancer. This woman was my mother. So I've always known that she's pretty great, but I'm big enough to admit that I may be a touch biased because she's my mom. But what transpired next was a moment of real clarity for me. When my mom passed, despite this very narrow life, we were flooded with emails, letters, flowers, plants, well wishes from all over. People that I didn't even know really knew my mom, like my friends from high school, um, sent me messages and said, I was really affected by your mom. Your mom meant a lot to me. And that was kind of surprising because it was just my mom, right? This kind of quiet, she's just kind of a quiet person. She kind of kept to herself, but very loving and caring. The school from which she had been retired for 5+ years offered to host and plan her service for free. And they dedicated a bench outside of the school to my mom. Now, I went to a small school, a small private school that I was only able to go to because my mom worked there. We did not have those kind of resources. Um, and that school is it's kind of like a cult. It's like people who went to that school and love that school, like love that school, right? And there are like teachers, coaches, all these very inspiring and effective people who have worked there for 30+ years. Like it's one of those places that teachers would go and teach, and even though they made less there than they may have been able to make at a public school, they absolutely would stay. They would stay because of the culture. It is kind of a place that people went and never left. And of all the people who live there, or live there, they didn't practically live there, of all the people who worked there and taught there and coached there and worked there, my mom is the only one who has a bench outside. There's a bench dedicated to her sitting outside. And of all the people, my mom's is the only bench. When we had her service, a lot of people came up and said, man, your mom was such a great woman, right? Your mom was my uncle said, your mom was the best damn woman I've ever known. People said to me, she was just the absolute best. And these were not just platitudes. It was very clear because I can, like my mom, I could sniff out platitudes like a bloodhound, right? And so the word great was used all day long to describe a woman who was 5 feet tall, quiet, kind of anxious, never really stood up to many people, barely traveled, never invented anything, never started a social movement, and never created things to share with others aside from lots of really good cookies, right? So it really made me think for a minute about, well, not a minute, many hours. What is greatness? What can this story teach us? Because the word great was used over and over again. So if we go back to some of our definitions, we have this distinguished, eminent, and notable. I would not say that would, I don't know that anybody would use those words to maybe describe my mom, unless you kind of flip the meaning of them a little bit. There was a lot of meekness. Now, you could say that meekness was a trauma reaction. And as a trauma psychologist, I spent time in my life kind of wishing my mom was less meek. I really did. And I kind of wanted her to like stand up for herself and push forward and advocate for herself in a more kind of strong way, right? And for much of my life, I really thought of that weakness as a trauma reaction from her childhood. But the more distance I have from that, you could actually just say that it's beautiful, right? There's a lot of beauty in being meek. Service to others, right? That my mom had in spades, right? Now there was to the point where, like, again, I oftentimes thought, I wish she would just kind of stand up for herself and do things for herself, and not live almost entirely in service to other people. And so again, for a lot of my life as a trauma psychologist, like I wished for her that she just, kind of stop doing that sometimes, even when it was like beneficial to me, and be like, stop enabling me, right? Stop, giving everything for everybody else and take some space for yourself, right? And I always kind of in my brain thought of this as more of kind of a trauma reaction. And I wish she would kind of overcome. Or you could say that was beautiful, right? The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. That's Mahatma Gandhi, right? It's okay to live in service to others as your core value, right? And that doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that, it's always a trauma reaction, although maybe some of it was a trauma reaction, right? That was part of her history. But you could actually just say that maybe this is beautiful. And, again, if we go back to some of those definitions of what is greatness, there's that beauty of soul and kindness. Now, obviously, my mom had that, right? So this is her with my daughter on the which my left. I don't know if it's your left. That's my daughter reading to my mom. That's me, my mom, and my kiddos several years ago. Actually, that was during COVID, so quite a few years ago. And then on the right, you'll see them riding on a very, very mild and tame ride at the amusement park. And you can see that my daughter is just kind of giggling and my mom was terrified. So I value that picture so very, very much. So if we step back and we are to believe all the people who attended my mom's service, all these individuals who are using the word great many, many, many times over and again, what can be learned? How do we dare to be great, taking lessons from my mom? Well, my mom very much lived on the principle of you say things for the right reasons. And she always said that to me throughout my life. You say things for the right reasons. You don't say things to fill up space, although I am good at that. You don't say things that are untrue, unkind, unnecessary. Use your words intentionally. So she would always say things for the right reasons. And looking back, that kind of adage of, should I say this? Ask yourself if it's true, is it kind, is it necessary? It's a really good principle to live by, right? My mom rarely, if ever, put her foot in her mouth because she was very intentional with her words. Do things the right way, right? So I will say this, it kind of drives some people crazy sometimes because if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it the right way. Right now, that right way is like my right way. So maybe that's what annoys them. But it's kind of like if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. So I, learning from my mom and just the way that she was, she would never leave something half accomplished. So she always did things just the right way, right through to completion. Don't let your past dictate your future, right? This could be a story about resentment, substance abuse. God knows she was exposed to a lot of it throughout her life. It could be a story about depression and trauma, but it's not, right? Yes, were some of maybe her traits a reaction to some of the things that she had experienced? Yeah, absolutely. But they were also beautiful. And they were things that really guided her and things that were really meaningful and important to those around her. So it's really important that we can recognize our past has led us to where we are, but it cannot dictate our future. And even some of those more dark, difficult places that we've been can lead to beauty on the back end. Focus on living a great life instead of being great. So my mom, absolutely. I don't know that if you ever were to say to her, how do you live a great life and how do you be a great person? She would just say, huh? I think she'd look at you like cross-eyed, like, just do the right things, say the right things. Greatness follows well-intentioned and purposeful behavior. Live in alignment with those values. So if for you, a great life is time with friends, being present and active, if it's service to others, even if it's visioning, right? Or it's kind of pushing forward, be you, right? Live in alignment with those values and block out others' goals, dictates, and noise. So my mom was one of those people that she would do like the Minnesota no. I don't know if I'm sure I have some other Minnesotans on there where like somebody would be like, oh, you could do this. And she would like smile and be like, yeah. And then she just wouldn't do it. To me, that's like the Minnesota no. And she was always very kind in kind of saying, sure. But my mom was unapologetically herself, right? There was no people didn't tell her how to be, right? And if they did, she would just nod then walk away and do her. Right. So, and this is something I've really learned from my mom. I think some of you have probably heard me say before that I like don't, my 12-year-old twins, I don't go to their school. It's not good time. It's not good, valuable time for me. I spend my time with my kids in other ways that are more valuable to me. But if I was on Facebook all the time and I saw all these parents, making 17 cookies and showing up at school, I could feel bad. But it's not what I most value in terms of time with my kids. Live authentically, unless you're an asshole, right? So like I talk about this with people sometimes. I'm like, just be you, be authentically you. But if you're a jerk, maybe work on that. Clarify your vision of greatness, right? And see it in yourself and others. And what I really do is I beg of you to not wait too long to see greatness in yourself or see greatness in others. There's a piece of sadness to me that I don't know that I fully appreciated how great my mom was until it was too late. So I beg of you, don't wait too long. And don't let somebody's past or how they arrived at their traits now dictate whether or not they're great. Okay, that's it. I'm at 7:30, Ricardo. Um, you are all welcome to contact me at any time. There's my contact information. I'm going to do a little shameless plug here for a second, but I wrote a book, which is crazy. And so it's available on Amazon. It's actually about my marriage. So I'm a divorced person, I'm a remarried. But I kind of wrote a book about my first marriage and some of the difficulties that I encountered, and some of the decision to eventually get divorced, and how one kind of process it and gets through it, and can come out on the back end stronger. So if you kind of like my version of, I think what I essentially did this morning is some storytelling, then it might be something that you enjoy. So Ricardo, are you there? Ricardo has left the
Yes.
building,
Yes.
people.
Here we are. Thank you very,
Yeah.
very, very much. I appreciate you. And yeah, excuse me, you were one of the OGs back in the day. It's yeah, it was interesting too, because when we very first sat down to have the episode, I think I don't remember if it was even over video that we were talking, or it was just audio, whatever it
Oh,
was, because we didn't I don't think we met until maybe a year after that. And but had put
yeah.
the your information out there from the study, and it was awesome. And I have to give a shout out to my original co-host that I had, excuse me, Whitney Wisner, who's now the deputy director of the old center that we worked at. I was her supervisor at the time. Um, she was part of getting you on and everything as well. And so shout out Whitney, love you. Hope you're doing well in Michigan, where it's snowing a lot. This is as far as I know. And she's been going in and actually posted a picture of like a sleeping bag in her office and helping out while everyone has been there. But again, all of that leading up to all of this, and as always, you're amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and also talking about your mom. My condolences right off the bat.
Thank you.
And when we were in the green room, everyone, as Michelle had said, she's like, I really didn't tell him what I was going to be talking about right until the moment we were about to go live, and I was like, all right, do your thing, like.
I told Ricardo, I'm like, I might cry a little bit, but that's okay, right? We cry.
Hmm. Of
Tears
course.
are a sign of what's most important to us. And so I appreciate you guys listening to my story this morning. It might be a little bit divergent from what you guys will be talking about the rest of the day, but um, hopefully it was helpful to some of you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, the comments alone, everyone talking here and everything has been excellent. Like I said, story is powerful, and it's all about daring to be great. That's what this whole conference has been about since the beginning. Born out of the
Yeah.
pandemic, people finding new things, storytelling, sharing about themselves authentically, what they know, and those around them. So this was perfect. thank you once again. Everyone, make sure to reach out to Michelle and everything that she does. She does some amazing things, and make sure to get that book as well. I was hoping that you were going to throw that up there and mention it. So there it
It's not
is.
bad. Look at this. I'm
Woo!
terrible at promoting this. Everyone's like, no one knows you have you wrote a book. I'm like, I was at a conference last week for ICRA and I was like, I never mentioned it. And I was like, oh, I should probably start doing that if I, you know.
I do the same thing, man. I always forget. People are like, "Why don't you ever advertise your books?" I'm like, I don't know, because I don't think about it at the time. Like that's
I
not.
know. I know.
I think you're the same way as me. Is when we're going into these engagements and stuff, these speaking engagements, we're not thinking about promoting us and doing what we
No.
do. We're just there to talk and give back. So
Right.
then when it gets to the end, you're like, oh, yeah, I could have mentioned that. But I think that's also what, why people watch and listen to us as well, because we're not just like QVC, check this out, It's it's not a sales pitch or anything. We're just being authentically us. But pick that up.
I'll just
Yes.
before you leave, Ricardo, can we just do a
Yeah.
little New Kids on the Block?
Oh yeah. We were
You ready?
yeah, let's go. It was like,
Okay, ready?
uh, uh,
Oh,
uh,
oh, 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 oh.
uh.
That's New Kids on the Block, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Oh yeah. Yep. The right stuff. Mm.
good.
This is what we were doing in the green room, folks. This is what we were doing right beforehand. Everyone's watching. They're like,
This is a
"Oh
problem.
man, yes, this is always fun." And yeah, we had to
Yep.
wrap it up. Maybe we can talk later
I'm
and
I'll
have some
sneak into
more
your
fun.
green room later.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, my friend. As always, amazing stuff. Everyone, make sure to follow Michelle on social media, get her book, and just reach out if you need anything. Michelle is amazing, and I appreciate you more than you know. For everyone, I'm going to be taking you to the next room, and our next speaker is going to be Dave Ralph, and he's going to be doing a session called "The Ripple Effect: The Subtle Signs of Stress." So I see Dave in there right now. I'm going to be bringing you in. Dave, just comment again in the chat in your room, in the next room, and then I'll pull you into the green room. All right. See you all in the next one, folks.